in New York, the result of a plane crash, it's believed, which took place about half an hour ago in New York. An eyewitness said there was a huge explosion. They thought, in fact, that the blast had come from inside. Pictures, as I said, of the World Trade Center on fire as a result of a plane crash into the upper stories of one of the tallest buildings in New York. We have no immediate word at the moment on injuries or fatalities in the disaster. It happened shortly before 9 a.m. local time. One eyewitness said the plane was coming in low and it looked like it hit at a slight angle. Large holes are visible in two sides of the building. It's a 110-story building, one of the landmark Twin Towers in the southern part of Manhattan. If you're just joining us, we're watching pictures of the World Trade Center on fire in New York, the result of a plane crash by what's thought to have been a twin-engine plane, possibly a 737, which appears to have flown directly into the World Trade Center, flying low. No news at the moment of injuries or fatalities. As you can see, there's a considerable fire there. We've got two large holes on two sides of the World Trade Center. It's a 110-story building. Let's get the latest now. The BBC's Jim Fish joins me. Jim, what can you tell us?
Well, very few more details than what you've already said, Nisha. All we know is that it's described as a passenger plane. We don't know how many passengers it was carrying. It does seem to have entered the trade tower very high up, and there are gaping holes on both sides of the tower. It looks as if it's penetrated right through the structure of it. We don't know precisely how many floors are affected. We don't know the number of casualties or injuries, but it is quite clearly a major disaster.
It's the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center, which we're looking at the moment, ablaze with thick smoke coming out of two sides of the building, the result of a plane crash by what's thought to be a twin-engined jet plane, possibly a 737. The accident is reported to have taken place at 9 a.m. local time. Joining us now on the phone from New York is Steve Evans, who was, I believe, in the building at the time. Steve, what can you tell us about what happened this morning?
People are running away very, very quickly. There are more explosions further down the building. It was calm until we came on the air now, but I'm now looking up at this building, and there is smoke billowing from the very top, but then there is a fire and an explosion about 20 stories further down. I was at the base of the building when it happened. There was one huge bang, the building physically shook. Then another two or three bangs, and the building again shook, and people came screaming past me.
At the moment, it looks as if both buildings are on fire.
Clearly, the thing is out of control. As I say, there is smoke billowing out from further and further down the building, and people are simply moving back. They don't know what has happened. Initially, the assumption was that it was a bomb. People have been coming past me now saying, no, it was an aircraft which hit the building. More than that, I cannot say, apart from to tell you that people here are very, very frightened. People are crying. People are shaking. They've stopped running away from the building. They are now walking away. There is moisture raining down from a clear sky. I only presume that comes from the disaster which is going on above me as I speak.
It must be a very busy scene, Steve. Are there a lot of people there?
Well, there are a lot of people. The man whose phone it is asking me, he's evacuating the shop, and I have to get off, I'm afraid, because he wants his phone back, and we have to leave. I'll stay with it here. There are people who are very, very frightened. Clearly, this is a very high, it is one of the tallest buildings in the world. There is an uncontrollable event involving explosions and fire going on above us. People simply don't know what's happening. An awful lot of people are just getting as far away as they possibly can.
Steve Evans, thank you for joining us from the World Trade Center. So clearly chaos there. The explosions still continuing. At the moment, it's not really clear whether there was a plane crash or exactly what went on, Jim.
Well, we are getting reports that a twin-engined jet airliner was the aircraft involved. That hasn't been confirmed. That is coming from an eyewitness. In terms of we are seeing both, it seems that both towers are affected by this. It could be that the aircraft went through one, right through, and the debris has affected the other tower as well. Obviously, what we don't know is what the emergency services are managing to do. There are, surprisingly at the moment, no signs of helicopters around the towers. Maybe that means that the emergency services are already on the spot within the tower, but that, by the look of the damage there, they will have great difficulty getting within range of that fire inside the towers, 110 stories high. The right-hand tower, it looks like the top 10 or possibly even more stories are affected. Lower down on the left-hand tower, it could be even more stories are affected.
If you've just joined us, we're just looking at pictures from the World Trade Center in New York, which is ablaze as a result of a plane crash, a plane flying in low, which went into one of the towers, possibly both of the towers, because clearly now both of them are on fire. You can see extensive damage there. This accident took place about half an hour ago at 9 a.m. local time in New York. The World Trade Centers are very busy office blocks, and as you can see, the fires are still raging. We heard from an eyewitness a short while ago that people were very frightened and running from the scene, and that the explosions there were still out of control, that explosions were still taking place at the World Trade Center as a result of this plane crash. There's some reports too, unconfirmed, that a second plane might also have crashed into the World Trade Center. Jim Fish is here with me in the studio. It's interesting that we're not seeing any rescue helicopters at the moment, isn't it, Jim?
Yes. Now, we can only assume that there are emergency operations going on inside those towers as we speak. Of course, they were built to rigorous safety specifications. They will have systems which can enable them to reach an accident, a disaster of this kind, very high up. These were the world's tallest buildings when they were constructed. They are no longer, but they are among the world's tallest. So there will be systems in place there, emergency backup systems. Even if the lifts are not working, there will be mechanical ways in which they can at least try to approach the scene of the accident. But it is surprising at the moment that there are no helicopters around, flying around there, possibly trying to get at the seat of the accident.
We've got some pictures that have also just come in of a second plane crashing into the other tower at World Trade Center. You can see a huge explosion there. So a double plane accident at the World Trade Center in New York this morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, at a very busy time, at a very busy set of tower blocks. We have no word at the moment of fatalities. Let's just take another look at those pictures of a second plane crash going into the other tower block at the World Trade Center. A huge explosion there, and a most unfortunate event. We have no word at the moment of fatalities, but they are very, very busy office blocks, and it all happened in the morning at a very busy time.
Seeing those pictures, I think one would have to ask, one accident is extraordinary in itself, but two, if that is a second aircraft striking the towers, one would have to ask the question whether this is deliberate sabotage. Bearing in mind that the World Trade Center was the target of a sabotage attempt, a bomb blast a few years ago, I think this must be now in the minds of certainly officialdom in the United States, whether this is in fact not an accident but deliberate.
Yes, Islamic militants were responsible for a large bomb explosion at the World Trade Center a few years ago, and Of course, it's too early to tell at the moment, but it certainly raises the question, with 2 plane crashes into the World Trade Center at such a busy time, whether in fact this is a deliberate event and not an accident. For viewers who are just joining us here on BBC World, we're looking at pictures of the Twin Towers in New York, of the World Trade Center, which are ablaze as a result of 2 small planes which flew directly into the upper stories of the World Trade Center. We'll just show you pictures of the second plane crash, which took place a short while ago, aimed directly at the second World Trade Center, the southern block of the World Trade Center. And you can see an enormous fire there. It's at a very busy time of day, right at the upper stories. We heard from an eyewitness a short while ago that the explosions as a result of those direct hits were still going on. The situation at the World Trade Center was out of control. The World Trade Center, one of New York's big landmarks, looks like it's been the deliberate target of a sabotage attempt, a deliberate terrorist attack on New York's World Trade Center. Joining us now is our New York correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what can you tell us?
Well, there's, of course, huge speculation here about what has happened. The 2 towers of the World Trade Center, those 2 famous towers, both on fire. We do know that about 9 minutes before the top of the hour, a first plane appeared to crash into the upper floors of one of the towers. And then within about 18 minutes later, a second plane or a second explosion happened. But there's, of course, huge speculation already about how on earth this could happen.
In 1993, of course, there was a major bomb explosion. It must bring back horrible memories of that.
Of course it does, and that's why people are thinking, how on earth could this have happened already? Some commentators are speculating that there was some form of missile involved. Of course, there's no confirmation at all of anything like that. People are talking, was it a deliberate navigational error? Of course, this all refers back to the February 1993 bombing of the World Trade Towers, in which 6 people were killed and more than 1,000 people were injured, and that, of course, a terrorist attack.
Any word of fatalities or injuries, Jane?
Not at all, but obviously this is going to be quite a serious number of injuries. We don't know what planes were traveling, how many people were on them, if any, of course, apart from a pilot. There's really no information at all. People here in New York just glued to live pictures unfolding on the television screens. These towers, just a symbol of New York, and amazing pictures of course, the plane going through almost one of the towers, and just this massive explosion.
Jane, the time of day for this attack, would it have been as office workers were starting their day, or too early for that?
It would have caught quite a number of office workers. The Port Authority headquarters, a big public service agency in New York, of course, in one of those twin towers. And also New York's commuter airports, very, very busy around that time of day, people going to Washington, to Boston, flying out of the city. So with no information at the moment, nobody's got any idea of how many people could have been hurt or injured or killed.
Have the authorities said whether any kind of warning was received about this kind of possible attack?
Certainly that is not on the agenda at the moment. Nobody's talking of any kind of warning. But it must be said that people in New York have been quite conscious that since the American embassy bombers were sentenced here, and one is due still to be sentenced this week, that there could be some kind of revenge involvement, of course, because of this 1993 attack.
Of course, at this stage, it is speculation as to who or what might be behind this attack. But tell us, Jane, at this stage, what kind of reaction are we getting from eyewitnesses as to what exactly happened?
Well, there's some confusion, people talking about possibly some kind of missile. Was it one plane? Was it two? But, of course, we know those bare details of the second plane or the second object going through and exploding the second tower. But eyewitnesses we haven't heard much from yet. I think there will be the shock and disbelief. I mean, it's like a scene from a film almost. It doesn't seem to be real to New Yorkers who I can see just glued to their television screens.
Jane, we're just going to remind viewers of what we're looking at the moment and run pictures that we've got of a second plane which flew directly into the World Trade Center in New York, causing an enormous explosion. Earlier, another plane had flown into the second block of the World Trade Center. This took place at about 9 a.m. New York time, just as office workers would have been gathering for the start of their day. Jane, why is it that the World Trade Center has proved to be such a target for these kind of attacks?
Well, we don't know if this is an attack at all, though the pictures of that second plane heading right towards the tower will, of course, raise suspicions. This is very, very early days, but it could be a navigational error as well. We really don't know. These are all the things that are being talked about at these very early stages. But those towers, like buildings like the Empire State Building, they say New York, and they say also New York's financial dominance and America's financial dominance. So perhaps that will turn out to be a clue as the investigation, which will have to follow this, of course, comes up with something.
We're looking at pictures of the World Trade Center ablaze in New York, the result of two planes which went into the side of the World Trade Centers in the upper stories. It's not clear at the moment whether this was deliberate, though that is the suspicion. Tell us a bit more about the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993 and who was found guilty for that, Jane.
Hello.
I think we've... Ash Rajan, an eyewitness to the attack, joins us now. Ash, what did you see? What can you tell us about what's going on?
Well, I just got off the train right in the belly at the World Trade Center, the train that was getting me in from home this morning. And first, there was just a tremendous smell of gasoline and petroleum. But we just figured that was a sort of a train situation. So we were making ourselves up rather calmly on those large escalators. And suddenly there was a sort of a panic run by the rest of the commuters. And then there was a huge explosion. And as we sort of rushed out of the building, we saw what looked like a ticker tape parade. Papers and streamers flowing everywhere. It just looked so surreal. But then the sheer fear and, I guess, the panic of the situation, most of us just ran to side corridors and stuff like that outside on the street. And then moments later, there was another explosion. So all we could see was a tremendous pall of smoke and certainly fire under that smoke in one of the towers of the building. But I got the impression that as I kept running towards my office, more and more people were saying that the second tower had caught on fire as well. I had no idea as to the planes and so on and so forth. I just thought it was some sort of an explosion or a regular fire. But then again, all of downtown looks like a whole mass of people on the street. Trucks, cars, all just strewn around, a pall of black smoke that looks like a tornado climbing over the rest of Wall Street. I could actually now see from my window. I'm now in my office, a little away from the World Trade Center, about a block away. And I could see through my window, and I could see just humanity right downstairs, just strewn with people, cars and trucks and so on and so forth, lots of confusion. And I guess I still don't know what is going on there.
It's a very, very busy time of morning, of course, isn't it, Ash?
Precisely. You couldn't have picked, a busier time this morning. So that is really unfortunate. I just hope and I pray for those people in those 2 or 3 floors, or perhaps even more floors, that were affected the World Trade Center. This is such a stark coincidence for me, because I was there when the explosion went off in the World Trade Center many, many years ago, and I had to walk down 63 floors from the 63rd floor of World Trade Center number 2 with the rest of my colleagues, and that was then. And today, I happen to be in the same building. How could that possibly be? The same building, right at the belly of the building, getting off the train.
How many floors appear to be affected?
just from a sort of a quick visual glance at the building, when I was outside the building, it looked more like 6 or 7 with a real heavy fire and a thick black ball of smoke. But apparently now, I've been hearing just from people on the street. I'm not sure how credible those observations are, but it's clearly more floors and certainly another building as well, another tower, the second tower.
Ash Rajan, thank you very much for joining us. And we've got another eyewitness to that accident or explosion at the World Trade Center. Jane Beresford joins us now. Jane, what can you tell us?
I was standing down on the Battery Park ferry terminal, just waiting to catch the ferry actually across to Ellis Island, and just heard a huge explosion. It's about 8:30 behind me. I thought perhaps a building was being demolished, but in fact, you thought there were just towers of smoke coming out within minutes. And again, we still thought it was just a building demolished. There wasn't any great sort of panic at that time. And then you saw flames raging through the building, and then approximately sort of 15, 20 minutes later, a plane flew down right above us, so very, very close to our heads, and smashed right into the other tower. It's a massive explosion, people screaming, a sort of panic. There wasn't even many fire ambulances and things like that on the street. It all happened so quickly.
And the emergency services response now?
They are on scene now, but people just seemed to be stunned. There seemed to be nothing happened while this sort of first explosion had happened, and there was sort of this sort of silence and nothing very. And then all of a sudden, all the ambulances and fire engines came down onto the streets, and the most shocking thing was this plane just coming, literally right above our heads and just smashed right into the second building. It was like something out of a film. You just couldn't believe what was happening.
You actually saw the plane going into the side of the building?
Smashed into the side of the building. I mean, you thought it was going to swerve to the left or the right to try and avoid it. It was so low, you knew it was on a collision course with the building, but it just seemed to be heading right for it.
Of course, at the moment, it's too early to tell what was behind it, but so far as you could make out, did it look like an accident?
No, it looked like it was. I mean, you just don't get planes. It was quite a large plane. It didn't look. It was low down in the sky in Manhattan. You're not used to seeing planes that low in the sky in Manhattan, and it just was heading straight for the tower. Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking at pictures of the World Trade Center, which is ablaze as a result of 2 planes which appear to have flown straight into the side of the World Trade Center in New York. It's too early to tell what has caused this, but let me remind you that there was a terrorist bomb explosion in the building in 1993. Eyewitnesses we're also getting reports that 2 United Airlines planes may have been hijacked. We're hearing that the US President George Bush will speak later on about the World Trade Center crash in Washington. Officials say the FBI is investigating reports of plane hijackings as well as the crashes. Joining us now from Washington is our correspondent, Stephen Sveach. Stephen, what can you tell us about the events in New York this morning?
Well, I think a huge shock here for everybody, not just in New York, not just in Washington, but right across the country. These 2 towers, the tallest buildings in New York, a symbol of the city's prowess. This is, of course, the world's great financial centre and the country's great business centre. I think a huge shock for everybody. And as seems increasingly likely, this does appear to have been something deliberate. It seems hard to believe that 2 planes could have crashed into the 2 towers of the World Trade Center by accident within minutes of each other. If indeed this was a deliberate attack, then I think this is going to cause a huge shock. And I think it will increase the sense, perhaps, for Americans of their vulnerability to these sorts of attacks, which, of course, have been very rare on American soil.
Any word yet of fatalities?
We don't have any word. The attacks came right at the start of the business day. It's possible just after 8:30, it seems, before 9 o'clock anyway. So it's possible that not too many people were in the building. But of course, once again, we're speculating here. But people in New York and in the States do tend to get to work pretty early. So unfortunately, it is possible that there were many people in the building. And we simply don't know what is going on. One can only imagine the devastation in those towers so high up, so far off the ground. One thing we do seem to know is that there wasn't too much debris on the ground. So it seems that at least people around the World Trade Center haven't been affected too badly. No fatalities on the ground, it seems.
We're looking at pictures of the World Trade Center ablaze in New York as a result of two planes crashing into the World Trade Center. It looks as if it was a deliberate act, but it is too early to tell. Some reports suggest that 6 people were killed in the accident or the explosion, and 1,000 people injured. It happened at about 9 o'clock in the morning, New York time. We've also got some pictures of the second plane, which crashed into the side of the World Trade Center. There you can see it. It looks as if it was heading straight for one of the towers of the World Trade Center, flying low, and it resulted in an enormous explosion. Some eyewitnesses have told us that the explosion sounded as if the whole building was coming down. 6 or 7 floors seem to have been affected on each of the buildings. Stephen Speech is with us from Washington. Stephen, we're expecting the president to speak about it soon.
Yes, I think this will be a very important moment, I think, for the president. I think he'll feel that he has to say something about this. The eyes of the whole nation are on what's going on in New York, and then I think the eyes of the whole nation will be on him. And, of course, it'll be interesting to see how he responds. It's possible that the authorities here in Washington know more about this than we do. It's possible they may have had some indication there was going to be some sort of attack, but it's equally possible that they don't. It's equally possible that they don't know any more than we do, and that they too are as it were, groping in the dark to see exactly what led up to this explosion. And therefore, it'll be very interesting to hear what the president has to say.
We're also getting some reports of possible plane hijacking, United Airlines planes. Anything you can tell us about that, Stephen? We've also got reports coming in that at the same time as this attack on the World Trade Center by 2 planes, there may have been a possible hijacking of a United Airlines plane, possibly 2 planes. Stephen Speech joins us from Washington. Stephen, can you tell us any more about these possible plane hijackings?
Those reports are being investigated by the FBI. Now, if they turn out to be true, then that will once again lend weight. Of course, it will lend absolute weight to the idea that this was an entirely deliberate attack. And it would seem, if it was an attack, very, very well planned and well coordinated by people who were not afraid to lose their lives in the process. So I think, all the evidence pointing towards something very coordinated, very deliberate, and powerfully symbolic in terms of its significance for American interests.
For viewers who've just joined us, you're looking at the New York skyline with the World Trade Center right in the middle, a landmark tower of New York, which has come under attack from 2 planes which crashed apparently deliberately into the side of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center, as we speak, is ablaze. The explosions appear to be continuing. One eyewitness told us that the explosions were continuing out of control. There are people fleeing from the scene. It's a very busy time of morning at the moment. The explosions took place about half an hour, 45 minutes ago, 9 a.m. New York time. It's not yet clear whether they were indeed deliberate acts or whether it was an accident. One eyewitness told us that she didn't think it was an accident because the plane was flying low and appeared to have gone straight into the side of the building. And this is what Jane Beresford said to us. Let's take another look at the pictures of the second plane, which flew into the side of the building just moments after an earlier plane had flown into the World Trade Center in New York. It was flying low and it appears to have been headed straight for the building. As you can see, several stories of that building are ablaze. Jane Beresford, an eyewitness, told us what she saw.
I was standing down on the Battery Park ferry terminal, just waiting to catch a ferry actually across to Ellis Island, and just heard a huge explosion. It's about 8:30 behind me. I thought perhaps a building was being demolished, but in fact, you saw there were just towers of smoke coming out within minutes. And again, we still thought it was just a building demolished. There wasn't any great sort of panic at that time. And then you saw flames raging through the building, and then approximately